The wind outside was cold and sharp. Snow covered everything, like a thick white blanket. Jack sat alone in his mountain cabin, drinking hot coffee. It was quiet, just the crackling of the fire and the ticking clock. He liked nights like this. No noise, no people, just peace. But then he heard it, a knock, very soft. Almost too quiet to notice, he frowned and turned his head toward the door. No one ever came up this far into the mountains. He stood slowly, set down his cup, and walked to the door. He opened it. There was no one there, just the cold wind rushing past and snow falling from the dark sky. He looked left, then right. Nothing. Then he looked down. His eyes widened. A small bundle lay at the foot of the steps, wrapped in torn silver cloth. He stepped outside and picked it up gently. It was warm barely. The cloth moved, and he heard a sound, a soft cry. It was a baby. But not a human baby. The skin was pale purple, the eyes a strange glowing green. Its fingers had tiny claws. The ears were longer than normal, but it was clearly a baby, and it was freezing, hungry, and crying. Jack didn't think. He turned and rushed inside with the child. He placed the bundle near the fire and unwrapped it carefully. The baby shivered, making soft sounds like whimpers. Jack found one of his old towels and wrapped the baby tighter. Then he took a small spoon, warmed some milk, and slowly fed the child. She drank it, slowly at first, then more eagerly. He didn't know if it was safe or right, but she needed help, and Jack had never been the kind of man to walk away from someone in need. As the baby finally fell asleep near the fire, Jack looked outside again. Snow still fell heavy, covering the trail, but he noticed something. Footprints. They were faint and already half covered by snow, but they were real. Someone had left this child here and had walked back into the woods. Alone, he grabbed his flashlight and followed the tracks a short way. The light danced through the trees. He saw drops of blood on the snow, and something shiny like a piece of broken metal. Maybe from armor. Then he heard it. A soft noise, like a groan. He pointed the light and found her. A woman, alien, just like the baby. Her skin was the same pale purple, and her eyes glowed a soft yellow. She was on her knees in the snow, breathing hard, arms shaking. She looked at him and tried to speak. Safe, she whispered. Then she collapsed face first into the snow. Jack rushed to her, checking her pulse. It was weak, but still there. He picked her up. She was light. Too lightened, carried her back to the cabin. Inside, the baby stirred and made a small, happy noise. Jack laid the woman beside the fire, covered her in blankets. He didn't know who they were or where they came from. But one thing was clear: she was the baby's mother. She had nearly died trying to save her child. Jack sat down, heart still pounding. He looked at both of them, sleeping near the fire. They had come from somewhere far, had run through danger, and had trusted a stranger's door, his door. Stood up and looked out into the dark woods again. Someone had hurt them, hunted them, and whoever it was might still be out there. Jack walked to the corner of the room, opened a metal box, and pulled out his old hunting rifle. He hadn't used it in years. Something told him this was just the beginning. He checked the lock on the door, added a wooden bar across it, then sat near the fire. Watching the mother and child sleep, snow kept falling outside, but inside, the room was warm. For now, they were safe, and Jack, once a man who wanted only peace and silence, now had a new reason to stay alert. A baby that wasn't human, and a mother who trusted him enough to fall at his door. Jack didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but he would face it, with his rifle in hand, because someone had left a child on his doorstep. And that meant the fight was now his too. The cabin was silent, except for the wind pushing against the windows. Jack sat by the fire, watching both the baby and her mother sleep. His rifle rested on his lap, and his eyes stayed sharp. He didn't know what time it was, only that it was deep into the night. The baby made a soft sound, then curled up tighter near the warmth. The mother lay still, wrapped in blankets, her skin pale and her lips dry. Jack stood up and walked over to check on her. He placed a hand near her face. She was breathing but weakly. He went to the kitchen and warmed some water. then dipped a cloth into it and gently placed it on her forehead. She flinched slightly at his touch, then relaxed. Jack stayed near, unsure what else to do. Suddenly the woman opened her eyes, bright yellow eyes, glowing like sunlight behind clouds. She saw Jack and gasped. Her hands reached for something, but there was nothing near her. Then she looked past him and saw her baby. The fear in her eyes changed. She sat up too fast, winced in pain, then crawled to the baby's side. She touched the little one's face and gave a soft sound, like a hum or a lullaby. The baby opened. Her eyes smiled and reached for her mother's cheek. Jack watched quietly. The moment was too personal to interrupt. He waited until the mother looked at him again, her body still tense. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said slowly, showing both hands. He pointed to himself, Jack, then pointed to her, trying to ask her name. The alien woman stared at him, confused. She looked at her baby, then back at him. "Zarilla," she said softly. Her voice was dry, cracked, but gentle. Jack nodded. "Zarilla," he repeated, trying to say it right. She tilted her head slightly, watching him, then slowly, with one hand, she pointed at herself and "The baby, run," she said. Then drew a circle in the air and pointed outside, chased. Jack understood. She had been hunted. He walked over to the fire, grabbed a stick, and drew in the ashes. A simple map, trees, a cabin, and arrows. He drew more arrows, enemies. Chasing, she nodded quickly, then added a shape with claws and big teeth. "Danger," she said, then clutched her chest. "Baby, leave." "Safe," her voice broke. She had left her child on Jack's doorstep because she thought she wouldn't survive. Jack stared at her, shocked. She had almost died in the snow, not for herself, but to give her baby a chance. He couldn't understand her full story, but he knew enough. Zarilla was strong, but she was out of strength. She needed help, and so did her child. Jack stood up and walked to a shelf. He grabbed some canned soup, warmed it, and offered it to her. She sniffed it carefully, then took a small sip. Her body shook from the warmth, and tears filled her glowing eyes. The baby curled up in her lap and made soft cooing sounds. Zarilla smiled and stroked the child's head, then looked at Jack again, eyes tired but thankful. He nodded.
"You're safe here,"
he said slowly. She didn't understand the words, but she saw the calm in his face. Outside, the wind blew harder. Snow hit the roof in waves. Jack checked the door again and made sure the rifle was loaded. Then something caught his eye, through the window. Far in the woods, something moved. It wasn't just wind. He grabbed the binoculars from the shelf and looked closer. A dark figure stood between two trees, tall and armored, watching, not moving, just watching the cabin. Jack stepped back from the window. Heart beating faster, he closed the curtains and returned to the fire. Zarilla noticed his face and sat straighter, holding the baby tighter. Jack didn't say a word, just nodded once. The enemy was still out there, and now it knew where they were. The morning sun had not fully risen. A soft gray light spread over the trees. Snow still covered the ground, untouched except for a single path. Jack stood outside the cabin, boots crunching on the icy ground. He held his rifle, eyes scanning. The forest, he hadn't slept much, not after what he saw last night. That tall figure, silent and still, just standing at the edge of the woods. It didn't move, didn't speak, just watched. Now it was gone. No tracks led away, just deep holes in the snow where it had stood. Jack bent down and touched the ground. The snow there was melted. The earth underneath black. He picked up a small object from the spot. It was metal, smooth, and cold. A broken shard of armor. He stood up quickly and looked around again. Nothing moved, but the forest felt different, to quiet. Back inside, Zarilla sat beside the fire, her baby in her arms. She watched Jack carefully, reading his face. He closed the door behind him and placed the metal shard on the table. Zarilla stood slowly, walked over, and looked down at it. Her eyes widened. She touched the shard gently, then shook her head. "Trackers," she said. "Hunters." She looked outside the window, fear in her eyes again. Jack nodded slowly. He understood. Whoever was after heard. They weren't gone. They were getting closer. Jack went into his storage room. It was dark and dusty, filled with old boxes, tools, and gear from years ago. He pulled down a large box and opened it. Inside were tripwires, bear traps, nails, and wires. He had once been a survivalist. Now those old skills were needed again. Zarilla followed him, watching silently as he worked. He set up alarms around the cabin, simple things, but enough to warn them, wires with bells, cans, tied to strings, bear traps hidden beneath snow piles. If anything moved too close, they would hear it at night. The fire burned low. Zarilla sat with her baby, rocking her gently. Jack sat across from them, sharpening a blade outside. The wind picked up again, whistling through the trees. Then, a faint sound, a single bell. Jack froze. He looked at Zaraloshi. Was already clutching her baby. He grabbed his rifle and crept toward the window. The curtain was thin. He pulled it aside a little, just enough to see, there between the trees, stood a new shape. Not the same one as before. This one was shorter, but it had glowing red eyes. Jack could see steam rising from its armor. The figure turned its head, slowly scanning the area. Then, without warning, it bent down and touched the snow. Something blinked on its wrist, light pulsing like a heartbeat. Jack stepped back quickly. Zarilla stood behind him, holding her baby close. She whispered something in her language, a word. "Full of fear seekers," she said at last. "Find us. Call others." Jack understood now. This was only the scout, if they didn't stop it now. More would come. He looked at his traps. Then out the back door he had an idea. He whispered to Zarilla, "Stay low. Don't move unless I tell you." She nodded, her eyes wide but brave. Jack slipped out the back. Moving through the snow as quietly as he could, he crept along the side of the cabin, his rifle ready. The figure was still standing near the front, tapping on its wrist device. Jack took a deep breath, aimed, and fired. The shot echoed like thunder in the trees. The figure fell, sparks flying from its chest. But something else happened. Its wrist device glowed bright. Small signals shot into the sky, blinking red. A message, an alert. Ran over and kicked the device away. The thing's armor was cracked, black liquid leaking out. It wasn't fully machine, not fully alive either. He heard movement behind him, Zarilla at the door. Baby still safe. Jack looked at the sky above them. Faint flash blinked once. Then again, something was coming. He had stopped one. But now they knew exactly where to go. Jack walked back to the cabin, face tense. "We have maybe a day," he said. Zarilla placed her hand over his. "No run," she said slowly. "Fight." Jack looked into her glowing yellow eyes. Something had changed. She wasn't just scared anymore. She was ready. He gave a small nod. They were no longer hiding. Not just surviving, they were preparing. Because now the forest wasn't just full of snow and silence, it was full of eyes. The snow had stopped, but the silence outside felt heavier than ever. The trees didn't sway, the wind didn't whisper, even the birds were gone. Jack stood on the porch, staring at the trees. He knew what was out there. He had seen one of them up close, and that was only a scout. Now more would come. He had maybe hours a day at most. So he went to work inside. Zarilla rocked her baby, eyes fixed on the cabin door. She didn't speak. But she watched Jack closely. She saw how he moved, fast but careful. She saw his hands turn wood and metal into weapons. Jack dragged an old wooden shelf across the cabin's front door. He nailed it down tight, reinforced it with metal bars. Then he moved to the windows, covered them with thick planks, left small holes just big enough to aim through. Zarilla stood and walked over. She looked at the tools he wasn't using, then picked up a hammer. Jack raised an eyebrow. "You sure?" Zarilla nodded. "No run," she said again. "Fight." Together, they worked. She helped him nail boards, build spike traps, and lay barbed wire around the porch. He showed her how to hold a knife, how to swing it. Her hands were small, but strong. Her eyes, once full of fear, now burned with focus as night approached. Jack brought out the last piece, an old generator, rusty, but still working. He connected it to floodlights he had used during old hunting trips. Now they pointed toward the woods. If anything moved, they'd see it inside. The cabin felt different. It wasn't just a place to sleep anymore. It was a shield, a trap, a last stand. Jack handed Zarella a small radio if something happens. To me, he said, you take her and run. Use this to call for help. She stared at the device. Then at him, no leave, she said softly. If you fall, I fight too. Jack didn't argue. Something inside him warmed, even in the cold. She wasn't just a scared mother anymore. She was a fighter now. Like him, they ate in silence. Canned food and old soup, the baby slept between them. Wrapped in warm blankets, Zarella watched her. Daughter's face. She whispered songs in a soft language Jack couldn't understand. But the feeling was clear hope. Suddenly, a loud clang echoed from outside. Metal hitting metal. Jack jumped up, rifle in hand. Zarella grabbed the knife and held it tightly. They moved toward the window and peeked through the hole. A figure was on the porch, but it wasn't alone this time. Two others stood behind it, tall, armored, and armed. Jack's floodlights flicked on. The figures froze, their armor glowing under the bright beams. One of them raised its hand and a loud, high-pitched sound rang out. The baby cried, Zarella. Held her close, whispering fast, trying to calm her. Jack opened the small gun slot near the door. He aimed carefully, breathed in, and fired. The first shot hit the porch mist. The second shot struck one of the aliens in the chest. It dropped with a loud thud. The other two backed away, but not far. They weren't scared, just surprised, then silence. Again, they disappeared into the trees. Jack lowered the rifle slowly. They're testing us, he said. Zarella didn't answer. She knew it too. Later that night, Jack went out to check the traps. One was triggered, but nothing inside. Just blood that meant one had tried to sneak closer, back inside. Zarella whispered something in her language. Then she looked at Jack. More will come, she said. He nodded. I know. But then, something strange happened. The baby crawled toward Jack's old jacket and pulled out something shiny. It was a metal disc. Jack took it and stared. It wasn't his. Zarella's eyes widened when she saw it. That beacon, she said. Tracker. It must have fallen off the scout during the fight. And it had stayed inside the cabin this whole time. They hadn't just been found by accident. They had been broadcasting their location the whole day, Jack. Grabbed the device and threw it into the fire. It sparked and hissed, but it was too late, if the enemy hadn't known before. They did now. He turned to Zarella. We don't have time, she nodded. Then we end this, she said. Together they stood by the window, watching the trees, waiting for what came next. Because now the cabin wasn't just their shelter, it was their battlefield. The snow cracked under heavy boots. Something was moving fast, heavy, and not alone. Jack sat near the window, rifled across his knees, his eyes locked on the forest line. Zarella stood beside him, her baby strapped close to her chest with cloth. Neither spoke. They didn't have to. They both felt that this was the night. A deep humming sound began, low at first, then louder. Lights blinked above the trees, blue and red, flashing like warning signs in the sky. Zarella's fingers tightened around the small blade Jack had given her. Jack checked his rifle one more time. Then the ground shook. Something had landed. Not far, close enough to send dust falling from the cabin ceiling. Jack opened the back door a crack. He looked toward the valley below. A ship, small and dark, had settled between the trees. Steam hissed from its sides. Figures stepped out. 5, maybe 6. Jack cursed under his breath and closed the door. He looked at Zarella. They're here. She didn't blink. She only whispered something in her language and kissed her baby's head. Then the first shot came. A beam of blue light blasted the front wall of the cabin. Wood splintered. Smoke rose. The baby cried. Zarella covered her ears and crawled to safety behind the sofa. Jack rolled to the side, rifle ready. Another blast hit the window, but the wood held. From his hole, Jack spotted the first attacker, tall, Armored, carrying a strange weapon, Jack fired. The shot hit its leg and the alien fell, screeching like metal tearing. Another came from the left. Jack shot again. Zarella stood suddenly, her knife in hand. A shadow passed by the back window too. Close, she moved fast, opened the door slightly and threw a blade. A scream came from the dark. Jack looked at her, surprised. Zarella only nodded. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was protecting her child. She was fighting, smoke-filled. The room now, Jack's traps triggered one by one snaps. Booms and cries from outside, metal spikes pierced one attacker. A fire trap lit another's arm, but more kept coming. The front door shook hard. Then it exploded inwards, splinters flying like knives. One hunter stepped inside, tall and glowing. With red lights on its armor, it raised its arm. A blaster pointed straight at Jack, but before it fired, Zarella lunged. She screamed as she drove the knife into the joint of the armor. The hunter staggered back. Jack took the shot. It fell. Heavy and still, breathing hard, Zarella dropped beside her baby, who was still crying. Jack knelt beside them. "You okay?" She nodded, shaking. He checked the room. 3 were down. But there were more. He could hear them outside, regrouping, planning. He touched Zarella's shoulder. "We can't hold this forever." She looked at him. "Tunnel?" she asked. Jack blinked, then remembered he had dug a small escape tunnel years ago. When he first built the cabin, it was hidden behind the cellar. He never thought he'd need it. They moved quickly. His avaders, his far spelted loss. When he first built the cabin, one cell times went down when I went. So, men hofs. To Tomi, one hullud, one holama. I said, all were sufful. Were so all was so. I went. Well, one row, I will one up. I want a wall, I want a wall, I want a wall. And led them into the tunnel. It was narrow, dark, and cold, but safe for now. Above them, the cabin shook again. More blasts, more roars. Jack whispered, "We need to go now." The tunnel led them out to a hill behind the forest, far enough to be hidden by the trees. From there, they watched the cabin burn. Bright flames danced in. The dark sky smoke rose high. Jack's home-gone Zarella stood beside him, silent. She didn't cry. She only held her baby tight. Jack stared at the fire, eyes hard. "They think we're weak," he said. "They think that was the end." Zarella looked at him. She held out her hand and whispered, "Then we show them. It's just the beginning." Together, under the cold stars, they watched the flames and planned what came next. Asterisk, the smoke still rose behind them. The cabin was gone. But Jack and Zarella had survived. So had the baby. That was enough for now. They had walked for hours through the cold forest. No words, just quiet steps. Jack led the way. Rifle in hand, eyes always moving, Zarella followed close, baby wrapped tight against her chest, behind them. The enemy would soon search the ruins. They had to stay ahead by sunset. They reached a hidden place, a deep cave, carved long ago by rain and time. Jack had found it during one of his hunting trips years back. He never told anyone. Now it was their only shelter inside. The cave was dry and warm, a small fire lit. Up the walls, Zarella sat with her baby while Jack paced, thinking, "We can't run forever," he said. "They'll keep coming until we stop them." Zarella nodded. She reached into her small satchel and pulled out something Jack hadn't seen before. A thin, glass-like panel, cracked but still glowing, a communication device. She tapped it gently. The screen flickered, then showed alien symbols. "Can it work?" Jack asked. Zarella tilted her head. She looked unsure. Then she pressed a few symbols and held it up. A small light blinked on the side. Then a voice came through, broken and weak. Survivor code. Received. Signal faint. Repeat, Jax. Eyes widened. That's human tech. Zarela nodded slowly. Your people, she said. Military. They came before, they helped us once. Jax stared at her. You've met humans before? Zarela looked away long ago, on another planet. But when war started, most left, some stayed. They died, Jack understood. Zarela didn't just fear the hunters. She had lost people too, now. She was risking everything to trust a human again. He took the device from her and adjusted the frequency, his old training. Kicked in back when he served in Earth's defense unit before he disappeared into the woods. Before he gave up on war, he spoke into the device. This is Jack Mercer, human, ex-soldier. I have one alien female and a child, being hunted by unknown enemy units. Need extraction. Repeat. Need extraction. Silence. Then static. Then a voice. Jack Mercer. Recognized. Stand by. Rescue team en route. 14 hours out. Jax. Hands tightened around the device. 14 hours. Could they survive that long? He turned to Zarela. Help is coming, but we need to slow them down. By time Zarela's eyes burned with fire, then we fight for her, she whispered. Looking at her sleeping baby, they began preparing. Jack laid traps around the cave entrance, tripwires, mines, and sharp spikes. Zarela sharpened wooden stakes, painted them with sap that burned like acid. They knew it wouldn't stop the enemy forever, but it would make them bleed. That night, the stars above were cold, and bright. Jack stood at the cave entrance. Scanning the trees, his breath fogged in the air, he thought of the baby sleeping inside, of Zarela, of the fire they had walked through, and he felt something return inside him, something he thought was going to hope. Suddenly, a light blinked through the trees. Then another. Then a sound, low and deep. Like growling thunder, Jack raised his rifle. They're here, he said. Zarela appeared beside him. Holding a spear, she didn't flinch, didn't shake. She only looked at the enemy and waited. Shapes moved between the trees, fast, quiet. Deadly, one stepped into the open, tall and armored. Its weapon hummed with power. Jack didn't wait. He fired. The blast lit up the woods. The alien fell. Another charged forward, triggering a trap. A fire mine exploded, flames climbing up its armor. It screamed, falling back. Zarela threw her spirit, struck one in the neck. Jack reloaded and kept firing. The cave echoed with battle. But still, they stood. Still they fought. Hours passed. 3 hunters down, more retreating, but they weren't done yet. Then just as the sun broke the horizon, a new sound filled the sky. Engines, loud and powerful. A ship, human. It roared over the trees. Spotlights flashing. Soldiers dropped. On ropes? Weapons ready? One shouted. Mercer, you got your signal? Jack stepped forward, blood on his arm. He nodded toward the cave, mother and child inside. Zarela stepped out, holding her baby tight. She looked at the soldiers, unsure. Jack gently placed his hand on her shoulder. They're with us. He said, You're safe now. The soldiers formed a circle around them. Scanning the trees, more ships landed nearby. The forest echoed with engines, not war cries. Zarela looked up at Jack, tears in her eyes. She said only one word, home. Looked at the rising sun, then at her, and nodded. Let's go home. The ship soared above the burning forest. Zarela held her baby close as they sat inside the human dropship. Her eyes were wide. Watching the trees vanish behind clouds of smoke and snow, she didn't speak. She just breathed slowly, her arms tight around the only thing that mattered, her child. Jack sat beside her, his shoulder wrapped in white bandages. He looked tired, blood on his boots, but alive. One soldier beside him nodded with respect. Not many civilians could have done what you did. Jack didn't reply. He just looked at Zarela. Then at the baby sleeping in her arms. That was answer enough. The ship shook lightly as it passed over the mountains below. The last of the enemy hunters retreated into shadows. They had lost, and now humanity knew they existed. Jack turned to Zarela. We're going to a base. You'll be safe there. Zarela looked at him with soft eyes. Not just safe, she whispered. Alive. When they landed, soldiers rushed to help. Doctors came forward. They tried to take the baby to check her vitals, but Zarela growled softly, stepping back. Jack raised a hand to stop them. She stays with her, he said firmly later. In the quiet room they were given, Zarela finally rested. She curled up beside her child on a soft bed. For the first time in weeks, she wasn't on the run. She wasn't cold. She wasn't alone. Jack stood outside the room talking with the senior officer. She's not just some lost refugee, he said. She knows things about those hunters. Their tech, their war. The officer nodded. We'll give her protection, but Jack, would you help her? Jack looked through the glass at the woman and child asleep inside. She knocked on my door in the middle of the coldest night of the year, said, and she didn't ask for anything. She left her child there, hoping someone would help. That was enough. The officer placed a hand on his shoulder. You've done more than help. You've started something. 2 weeks passed. Jack stayed at the base. Zarela recovered fast. Her people healed differently faster. Stronger, the baby began laughing, crawling, playing with Jack's jacket strings. She called him Da. Jack smiled every time. He never corrected her. Zarela spoke more now. Her English was still broken, but her words had weight. She told the scientists everything she knew, how her ship crashed, how her people were hunted across systems. She described the enemy, the Sirax, and how they destroyed anyone who showed kindness to outsiders, especially humans. They fear you, she said. They know what you did before. In the old wars, Jack frowned. I thought humanity ran away from the galaxy. Zarela shook her head. No, they remember what you are. They remember that humans never stop when they choose to fight. More officers came, asking questions, wanting her help, and she gave it. But only on one condition, that we stay together, she said, pointing to Jack and her child. He is ours now? Jack was silent. He had lived alone in the forest for years. He had chosen to forget the war, the pain, the chaos. But now, looking at this strange, brave woman and her child, he saw a future again. One morning, the commander called Jack into his office. There's something you should know, the man said. We've picked up chatter that those hunters weren't working alone. The Sirax are coming. Jack stared at him. For us. The officer nodded. For her, for the child, for you. But now, we're ready. That afternoon, Jack walked to the garden, where Zarela sat holding her daughter. Sunlight touched her skin. The baby laughed, reaching out to grab a butterfly. Jack knelt beside them. They're coming, he said. Zarela looked at him calmly, then let them come. He replied, we won't run anymore. Jack took her hand. Then we fight. Zarela smiled gently. Not just fight, we build years later. A monument stood at the base where it all began. It showed a human man opening a door in the snow. At his feet, an alien child in a bundle. Beside him, a tall woman with glowing, yellow eyes. The words carved beneath said, she was not of our kind, but we made her one of ours. And from that moment, everything changed.